In this video, we're going to look at some examples that differ slightly from the previous video. So let's have a look at what we've got here. Draw a neat sketch graph of y equals 3x. All right, so let's get started like we would before. We see that the slope or the gradient is 3, so we say that m is equal to 3. And because that's positive, we know that it's increasing. And then we have to look at the y-intercept, but there is no plus c. So we realize that it actually just means that it's plus 0. So that 0 is the y-intercept. So we can go ahead and we can plot that. When we go to on the graph where y equals 0 and we see that point there. That point where y is 0 and x is 0 is called the origin. Great, so that's the first step, done and dusted. Let's move on to finding the x-intercept. Hopefully you remember that we said y equals to 0. So we get 0 equals 3x. We divide both sides by 3, and then we get x equals 0. Well, that's not very helpful because if I go to where x equals 0, that's where y equals 0. It's the origin. So I only have 1 point. But in order to draw a straight line graph, I have to have 2 points. So this isn't going to work. We can't use this method. Instead of using our x-intercept, we're going to look at our gradient. I hope that you guys remember that our gradient is our change in y over our change in x, or y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. We can also call this the rise over the run. So let's have a look at this in this example. Instead of just writing 3, because I want rise over run, I'm going to write it as 3 over 1. That means that the rise, the vertical shift or the up and down shift is 3, and the run or the horizontal left and right shift is 1. Because 3 is positive, we're going to go up 3, and because 1 is positive, we're going to go right 3. So let's do this on our graph. From where we are at the origin, we're going to go up 3, and then we're going to go across 1, and we're going to plot that point right there. So now we suddenly have 2 points for our graph, and we can just connect the dots and draw our line. And again, we label our graph. I hope that you can see the difference here and why our previous method doesn't work when it goes through the origin. Let's have a look at this example here. Y equals negative 1 over 4x. Now, if we look at our slope again, we can see that our gradient is negative 1 over 4, which means that we are expecting it to slope downwards. And once again, we don't have a plus c value, so we're going to say plus 0, which is our y-intercept. And we're going to plot that on our graph right there at the origin. Now we know that we can't use the x-intercept method because this went through the origin. So we're going to use our gradient method again, where we remember that our gradient is our change in y over our change in x, which is also our rise over run. And here we already have our gradient in a fraction. Just notice that I'm going to move that negative to the top. It really doesn't matter if you move the negative to the top number or to the bottom number, as long as it belongs to one of them. Remember, the numerator, the negative one, tells us the rise. That's the up and down shift. Because it's a negative, we are going to go down 1 space. And then we look at the denominator, and because it's a positive, we are going to go right 4 spaces. From our origin, let's go down 1, and let's go across 4. Now, we can plot our point right there, and there you go. We have 2 points. We can now connect the dots, and there's our graph. And just like we expected, it's a downward-facing graph, and because we are getting really good at this, we remember to label our graph. Those are the 2 methods that we're going to look at. The first was with 2 intercepts, and the other is now going through the origin.